In the year 10,191, humanity has mastered advanced space exploration, traversing diverse corners of the cosmos. Each celestial body functions as a distinct nation governed by dukes, collectively forming a vast empire. Notable among these planets is Arrakis, distinguished by its unforgiving desert terrain, concealing the exclusive reservoir of spice, a precious substance vital for human vitality and essential for interstellar journeys. Despite the harsh environment, Arrakis holds unparalleled value, prompting all noble houses to vie for dominion over it. The indigenous people, referred to as the freemen, endure the intrusion of outsiders or spice harvesters, who clandestinely exploit the land under the cover of night to evade the scorching daytime temperatures. The locals, victims of colonization, suffer cruel treatment at the hands of these outsiders, who seek to exploit Arrakis for its spice. The influential Harkonnen family, having settled on the planet years ago, currently commands the spice production, amassing wealth surpassing even that of the Emperor. The freemen, resilient warriors native to Arrakis, persistently resist the spice harvesters, attempting to repel them and reclaim their homeland. Despite their unwavering efforts, however, on a fateful day, the Emperor issues a decree that expels the Harkonnens and their entourage from the planet, leaving the populace bewildered as to the reasons behind this unexpected decision. Simultaneously, in Caladan, Lady Jessica and her son Paul, scions of House Atreides, share a morning meal. Jessica encourages Paul to hone his Bene Gesserit abilities, specifically urging him to practice the voice, a skill enabling the manipulation of others' minds. Paul attempts to use it on his mother, but his initial efforts prove futile. Jessica underscores that mastering such powers demands years of dedication. Inquiring about Paul's dreams, she subtly probes for any visions, prompting Paul to conceal his thoughts about a girl named Cheney. Following breakfast, Paul delves deeper into the mysteries of Arrakis, discovering its perilous environment plagued by formidable sandstorms and colossal sandworms. Prolonged exposure to the spice has bestowed the freemen with distinctive blue eyes, elevating the substance to a sacred status in their culture. However, the Empire exploits spice for interstellar navigation. Soon after, Duke Leto and Paul welcome the Herald of the Change. Bearing orders from the Emperor, House Atreides is to assume control of Arrakis and act as its steward. Duke Leto, acknowledging the responsibility, seals the agreement with his ring. Later, Paul confides in Duncan, the Swordmaster of House Atreides, expressing his desire to accompany Duncan and his team to Arrakis. Duncan, mindful of potential repercussions, declines, citing the risk of court-martial. Undeterred, Paul divulges his premonitory dreams about Arrakis, including visions of Duncan alongside the Freeman and meeting his demise in battle. Despite Duncan's persistent refusal, rooted in skepticism about the validity of Paul's dreams, the determined young man refuses to concede. Seeking an alternative route, Paul approaches Leto, imploring him for consent to accompany Duncan to Arrakis. However, Leto also denies the request, emphasizing Paul's crucial role by his side as the family ventures to Arrakis. Leto harbors concerns of an impending war, prompting his preemptive dispatch of Duncan and a team to initiate diplomacy with the Freemen. Subsequently, Paul engages in sword-fighting training with Gurney, House Atreides' warmaster. Gurney, frustrated by Paul's apparent lack of seriousness, compels him into combat. Employing force-field shields to avert lethal blows, the intense sparring culminates in a deadlock, emphasizing the potential gravity of their situation. Gurney underscores the ruthlessness of the Harkonnens, cautioning Paul to prepare for the looming conflict. Meanwhile, on Giedi Prime, the Harkonnen homeworld, Rabban confronts his uncle Baron Harkonnen, reporting the departure of all their ships from Arrakis. Outraged and bewildered by the Emperor's actions, Rabban seeks an explanation, but the Baron and his enigmatic associate, Pitta, cryptically hint that not every gift is as benevolent as it seems. Back in Caladan, Jessica rouses Paul in the dead of night, revealing the arrival of Reverend Mother Gaius from the Bene Gesserit school. Having divulged Paul's dreams to her, Jessica initiates the meeting. Before their encounter, Dr. Yu discreetly communicates to Paul, cautioning him about the dual motives of the Bene Gesserit. Despite Yu's assurance of Paul's strong heart, Jessica, using sign language, implores him to keep their shared secret. En route to meet the Reverend Mother, Jessica once again employs sign language, reminding Paul to recall his training. Upon entering the room, Reverend Mother Gaius issues a directive, compelling Jessica to remain outside. As she departs, Jessica instructs Paul to comply with every command from Gaius. Paul, resentful of Gaius giving orders to his mother, finds himself further agitated when she employs the voice to draw him closer, coercing him onto his knees. Gaius, with a poised demeanor, directs Paul to place his hand in a box while holding a poison needle near his neck. The condition is clear: Should he withdraw his hand prematurely, the consequence is instant death by the needle. As the unbearable pain intensifies, Jessica recites the litany against fear, and amidst the agony, Paul begins experiencing visions of the desert but maintains his composure. Successfully enduring the trial, he withdraws his hand unscathed. Gaius explains that had Paul succumbed to his impulses like an animal, she would have been compelled to eliminate him due to the overwhelming power inherited from his mother. Inquiring about his dreams, Paul recounts the tale of the girl in the desert. With the test concluded, Gaius departs, leaving behind a reminder for Jessica that training a man for the Bene Gesserit is a breach of the rules necessitating Paul's test. It surfaces that Jessica, contrary to Bene Gesserit instructions, bore only daughters due to her conviction that she could give birth to the chosen Messiah. Alone after Gaius's departure, Jessica discovers that Paul overheard their conversation. Paul accuses the Bene Gesserit of clandestinely manipulating the Imperium's politics, but his mother reveals a more intricate truth. The Bene Gesserit across generations has worked towards the emergence of the One, a mind capable of bridging space and time, spanning the past and the future. While they believe Paul might fulfill this role, he laments being merely a pawn in a grand design. The Atreides family swiftly organizes their belongings and makes their arrival on Arrakis, greeted by resounding cheers from the freemen. Puzzled by the enthusiastic reception, Paul questions the significance, prompting Jessica to reveal that, in the freemen's language, they hail him as the Messiah. Following an extensive flight across the desert, they reach the fortified city of Arrakeen, shielded by walls against the harsh elements and the colossal sandworms. Within the confines of his room, Paul delves deeper into the intricacies of the planet. He learns about the freemen's unique sand walk, a methodical stroll mimicking the natural sounds of the desert to avoid attracting sandworms. A sudden interruption occurs as Paul observes a minuscule floating assassin's device infiltrating through a small opening in the wall. The device hovers toward Paul, creating a tense standoff until the entrance of a servant snaps him back to reality. Reacting swiftly, Paul seizes and crushes the device in his hand. Subsequent investigation by guards reveals the assassin's lifeless body, concealed within a wall for 6 weeks, awaiting the opportune moment to strike. Simultaneously, our Bene Gesserit sister rendezvous with Baron Harkonnen and Pitta, conveying a confidential message from the Emperor. The Emperor pledges to reinforce Harkonnen's forces with the formidable Sardaukar, an elite military unit, but stresses the imperative of secrecy. The sister mandates the preservation of Jessica and Paul's lives while hinting at the permissibility of Leto's demise. Harkonnen solemnly vows to spare Jessica and Paul, but, once alone, instructs Pitta to annihilate the entire Atreides family, betraying the agreement made with the Bene Gesserit sister. In a subsequent development, Leto and his advisory council determine the necessity of inspecting the spice silos, suspecting sabotage by the Harkonnens. The examination is deferred until the arrival of the Judge of Change, who will oversee the process. During this deliberation, Duncan enters and briefs them on his mission. Having immersed himself in Freeman society for 4 weeks, he unveils a revelation. Millions of Freemen reside on Arrakis, some dwelling in subterranean tunnels unbeknownst to the Harkonnens. Duncan introduces Stilgar, the leader of a Freeman tribe, who he has brought to meet the Duke. After Leto extends a greeting, Stilgar, in a seemingly disrespectful gesture, spits on the ground. Yet in Freeman culture this signifies respect, and Leto reciprocates the gesture. Stilgar voices their grievances, emphasizing the exploitation of their spice without reciprocation. Leto, acknowledging the Freeman's suffering, pledges to ensure that his people will no longer intrude upon their way of life. Stilgar accepts this commitment as an honorable resolution but prepares to depart. Paul, however, implores him to stay, and though regretfully unable to do so, Stilgar communicates recognition to Paul in his native language. Subsequently, Duncan presents Freeman technology borrowed during his time with them, including a paracompass capable of discerning direction despite magnetic interference. Later, Leto and his retinue encounter the Judge of Change, Kynes, whose assertive demeanor nearly triggers a lethal response from the guards. Kynes proceeds to inspect the stillsuits worn by Leto and his people, ensuring their viability in the desert. In a sudden turn of attention, Kynes observes the unconventional manner in which Paul wears his boots and inquires about the source of this method. Paul attributes it to intuition rather than formal instruction. Meanwhile, a harvesting crawler extracts spice from the surface, accompanied by a spotter on the lookout for sand waves, signaling potential worm activity. The deep-traveling worms, attracted by noise and vibrations, pose a threat that prohibits the use of shields due to their worm-attracting nature. In that moment, Leto discerns a sand wave, prompting Kynes to summon a carriole for the retrieval of the spice crawler. The carriole descends and attempts to pick up the crawler, but a malfunction hinders its operation, endangering the crew aboard the crawler. Recognizing the imminent threat, Leto swiftly decides to employ the 3 available aircraft to rescue the endangered crew. Upon landing near the crawler, Leto instructs his men to discard the shield generators to create sufficient space. Through radio communication, he urges the crawler's crew to abandon ship and join the awaiting aircraft. The carriole takes off, leaving the approaching sandworm in its wake while Paul guides the crew toward the aircraft. However, Paul abruptly enters a trance, freezing in place. As the aircraft is about to depart, they realize Paul is missing, with the sandworm dangerously close. Paul, on his knees, experiences strange words in his mind before snapping out of the trance, guided to safety by Gurney. Together, they narrowly escape the surfacing sandworm, witnessing it devour the crawler whole. Upon their return to the base, Leto confronts Kynes, asserting that the Harkonnens deliberately provided faulty equipment to ensure their failure. Kynes counters, attributing the carriole malfunction to its age rather than sabotage. Following the incident, Paul undergoes examination by Yu, who notes his sensitivity to spice but assures that he will recover. After Yu's departure, Paul confides in Jessica, revealing that his reaction wasn't an allergy but a vision. He describes the visions involving the desert, war, and an unexpected moment of kissing Cheney. The experience proves perplexing, as he witnessed what he believed to be his own death but in a manner contrary to his expectations. In another revelation, Paul discloses that he is aware of Jessica's pregnancy, a revelation that catches her off guard, as she had just recently discovered the news. Meanwhile, on the planet Seleucia Secundus, the Sardaukar army readies itself under the watchful eye of Pitta. As evening falls, Yu pays a visit to Paul, leaving behind a beverage laced with a covert sedative. Soon after, the base is plunged into chaos as guards respond to a disturbance, only to be swiftly eliminated by an unknown assailant. This mysterious figure proceeds to infiltrate a room, disabling the base's shields. Sensing something awry, Leto, awakened by the commotion, embarks on an investigation. Discovering a lifeless body, he attempts to alert security but receives no response. Activating his shield, Leto is confronted by a poisoned dart that penetrates the protective barrier, rendering him unconscious. The enigmatic figure emerges, revealing itself as Yu. Gurney, roused to the unfolding crisis, learns of the downed shields and rushes outside to witness a massive enemy ship looming overhead. Urgently, he commands his forces to launch their own ships, initiating a chaotic battle as explosions erupt across the base. Enemy transport vessels touch down, disgorging soldiers, prompting Gurney and his men to engage in hand-to-hand combat. At the main steps, a valiant group of Atreides fighters manages to hold off the invaders momentarily, but is ultimately overwhelmed and annihilated by the Sardaukar. Returning to Leto, who regains consciousness but remains immobile, Yu unveils a shocking revelation. He explains that he has struck a deal with the Baron, surrendering Leto in exchange for the release of his hostage wife, held captive by the Harkonnens. After extracting Leto's ring for Paul, Yu implants a false tooth in Leto's mouth as a part of this ominous pact. Leto faces a perilous dilemma as he realizes the implanted false tooth contains a deadly poison gas. Timing his actions is crucial, as biting down on it will unleash the lethal gas and give him an opportunity to take down Baron Harkonnen. Meanwhile, as Rabban prepares to execute Atreides prisoners, Duncan employs stealth to eliminate adversaries, eventually discovering the noble family's chambers empty. Swiftly dispatching enemies in his path, Duncan escapes in an aircraft. Simultaneously, it is revealed that Paul and Jessica have been abducted and are being transported in an aircraft. The Harkonnen soldiers discuss unsavory intentions toward Jessica, prompting Paul's protest. Despite attempting to use the voice, Paul's initial efforts prove futile. The soldiers decide to discard Paul into the desert, and Jessica, using sign language, guides Paul to harness the right pitch. Concentrating, Paul successfully employs the voice, compelling a soldier to eliminate his comrades and release Jessica. In a swift retaliation, Jessica dispatches the soldier, securing their freedom. The aircraft lands in the desert, but remote sabotage cripples it, leaving Paul and Jessica stranded as they witness the city burning in the distance. Discovering a survival kit with an Atreides beacon, Paul finds his father's ring and a tent. Meanwhile, Leto awakens in the presence of Baron Harkonnen. Yu pleads for his wife's freedom, but the Baron callously kills Yu. Informing Leto of his family's demise and the fall of House Atreides, Leto begins to whisper. Activating his shield, the Baron leans in and Leto bites down on the false tooth, releasing the deadly gas that claims the lives of several guards. Following the gruesome event, men in protective suits enter the room to find the Baron alive on the ceiling. In a separate turn of events, Duncan confronts Kynes upon landing, expressing frustration at the lack of warning. Kynes asserts her neutrality as a judge, but Duncan contends that House Atreides was sent to Arrakis to meet its demise, challenging the notion of neutrality in this context. Amidst the vast desert, Paul and Jessica seek refuge in a tent, the rhythmic sounds of the Atreides beacon echoing in the solitude. In an inadvertent encounter with Spice, Paul is thrust into another vision of Chani, revealing a monumental battle where he dons a full suit and bears striking blue eyes. As the vision unfolds, Paul becomes increasingly agitated, foretelling a holy war spreading across the universe under the Atreides banner. When Jessica attempts to console him, he erupts in anger, bemoaning his status as a product of the Bene Gesserit. After a second attempt, Jessica succeeds in calming him, embracing him as he acknowledges the death of his father. The beacon signals an impending event, prompting them to vacate the tent, now shrouded in sand. Initially attributing the alarm to a trivial cause, an aircraft lands, revealing Duncan and Kynes. Duncan, respectfully kneeling, addresses Paul as Duke. They eventually reach an aged ecological testing station to weather an approaching storm. Paul conveys to Kynes the shared fear among the great houses, emphasizing the necessity of unity against the Empire. Broaching the Freeman belief in a messiah, Kynes dismisses it as superstition. However, Paul astounds her by revealing intimate details about her and claiming to have witnessed her dreams. Proposing a vision of transforming Arrakis into a paradise as emperor, Paul faces skepticism from Kynes. In a tense turn of events, the enemy discovers the station, sparking a fierce battle with the Freeman guards. Duncan, recognizing the imminent conflict, salutes Paul before venturing outside to join the fray, sealing the door behind him. Demonstrating extraordinary skill, Duncan engages multiple adversaries, felling several, yet ultimately succumbs to overwhelming numbers. Simultaneously, Kynes guides Paul and Jessica through a concealed exit as enemy soldiers unleash a barrage on the locked door. Evading the gunfire, the trio races for safety. Surprisingly, Duncan emerges, still alive, launching a counterattack against the soldiers, creating a window for his companions to escape before meeting his final demise. Outside, Kynes directs Paul and Jessica to take an aircraft, imparting advice on navigating the storm and finding the Freeman. Unfortunately, there isn't space for her to accompany them. As Paul and Jessica soar away, Kynes strategically places a thumper to lure a sandworm, intending to use it as transport. Tragically, she is discovered and slain by Sardaukar soldiers. In her final moments, she signals the sandworm, which arrives promptly, consuming them. Meanwhile, the pursuing enemy relentlessly trails Paul and Jessica, launching missiles at their aircraft. Paul skillfully maneuvers into the sandstorm, eluding the tracking missiles. However, the storm damages the aircraft, prompting Jessica to recite the litany against fear. In a vision, Paul is instructed to relinquish control, allowing the storm to guide them. Although they emerge from the storm, the wings disintegrate, leading to a crash landing. Remarkably surviving, they don stillsuits and embark on a quest to locate the Freeman. During a brief rest, Paul receives another vision from Chani, urging him to confront his fears. The vision introduces another Freeman who emphasizes Paul's need for further learning. Employing Duncan's paracompass, Paul and Jessica press onward, with Paul imparting the sandwalk technique to avoid attracting sandworms. A misstep on drum sand alerts a nearby worm, prompting a frantic escape. To their relief, a timely activation of a thumper diverts the sandworm's attention. Climbing onto nearby rocks, they discover they are encircled by Freeman, who had strategically set up the thumper. Within the gathering of Freeman, Stilgar asserts that Paul should not be harmed, highlighting the potential for him to assimilate their ways despite appearing weak. Jamis, skeptical of Paul's messianic stature, questions his need for rescue. Stilgar elucidates that Paul's youth offers a chance for learning, but Jessica, being older, poses a challenge. The Freemen, however, react aggressively. In an impressive display of combat prowess, Jessica seizes Stilgar, holding a knife to his throat. The Freemen momentarily retreat, and Jessica releases Stilgar, who eventually concedes to their inclusion. Amidst the tension, Paul senses Chani's presence, disbelieving in his messiah status. Despite the urgency to move, Jamis opposes bringing the newcomers and challenges Jessica to combat. Stilgar intervenes, stating that Jamis cannot challenge a priestess. To settle the dispute, Paul volunteers to fight in Jessica's name, initiating a confrontation. During the preparation, Paul experiences a vision foretelling his defeat and the necessity of his death for the Messiah's emergence. Chani offers Paul a blade crafted from worm teeth, emphasizing a desire for him to face death with honor. The duel ensues, with Paul gaining the upper hand and sparing Jamis repeatedly. However, a vision momentarily overwhelms Paul, leading to his fall. Embracing his destiny, Paul rises and delivers a fatal blow. After the skirmish, Stilgar declares Paul one of them, while Jessica insists on leaving the planet. In contrast, Paul asserts that their purpose on Arrakis transcends spice or wealth. It's about embracing the strength of the Freeman. Expressing his commitment to their path, Paul signals their willingness to join the Freeman if accepted. As the group ventures into the desert, Paul and Jessica witness a Freeman riding a sandworm using hooks. Cheney assures Paul that this is only the beginning of their journey. That's the end of the video. Thanks for watching and have a good day.